When we talk about what makes a city thrive, we usually point to what we can see. New buildings, new businesses, and new people moving in. But a living city is not built by skylines. It's built by whether the people who already live there are allowed to build a future. A living city is a place where I can thrive, my children can thrive, my neighbors can thrive, and not just today, but for generations. And yet, in too many cities across the country, there's an invisible line that decides who gets to do that. That line is called credit. Credit is the quiet gatekeeper to opportunity. It determines whether you can buy a home, start a business, get a car, or even move into a better apartment. It decides whether you pay fair prices for your money or predatory ones, and whether you can recover from a setback or get trapped by it. And for millions of people, that gate is locked long before they even get close to it. Here's the paradox. Rent is the largest bill most families pay every single month. It's bigger than a car payment, often bigger than a mortgage. Yet it's the one bill that, if you miss it, threatens the most basic thing you have, shelter. But for decades, paying rent on time has counted for almost nothing when it comes to building credit. So you can do everything right, pay your rent, keep a roof over your family's head, show stability year after year, and still be told by the system, you don't exist. That's what credit invisibility means. It means your consistency doesn't register, your responsibility doesn't show up, your financial life never quite begins. In Rochester, New York, about 1 in 5 residents has no credit history at all. That's double the national average, and that means tens of thousands of people are effectively locked out of the financial system, not because they're reckless or unreliable, but because the system was never built to see them. A living city cannot be a place where people are invisible, because belonging is not symbolic. Belonging is structural. Belonging shows up in the rules that decide who gets approved, in the data that determines who gets counted, in the systems that decide whose stability turns into opportunity. So what happens when a city decides to change what counts? What happens when a city says that paying rent, the thing people already do to keep themselves housed, should also help them build a financial future? What happens when a city turns the biggest monthly expense most families carry into a bridge instead of a barrier? That's the story we're telling today. My name is Justin Charles, and this is Live with Living Cities. So, if credit is one of the invisible systems that decides who gets to build a future in a city, then the real question becomes this: who's responsible for changing that system? Because credit isn't controlled by one landlord, it isn't controlled by a bank, and it isn't something a single family can fix on their own. It's built into how cities, housing providers, financial institutions, and public policy all work together. And that's where Living Cities lives. We don't just fund programs, we work with cities to change the conditions that shape people's lives at scale. And to help us unpack what that really means in this case, I'm joined by people who've been thinking about this from a systems and a city level. Joining me today are Santiago Carillo, my colleague here at Living Cities, and Madelaine Britt of the Mayor's Office of Financial Empowerment in Rochester, New York. I'm going to talk to Madelaine through a systems lens, while Santiago will be talking to her from the city's lens. Santiago, Madelaine, thank you for joining us here on Life of Living Cities. So, Santiago, you've been here on the program before. You're my colleague here at Living Cities. But for the folks who may be listening to you and hearing you for the first time, can you tell us who you are and about the work that you're doing?
Well, thank you for having me again on the podcast, Justin. My name is Santiago Carillo. I lead our local impact and innovation team. So all of our place-based, city-facing initiatives, as well as our national network and cross-sector engagement portfolios. Exciting to be here.
Thank you very much, Santiago. Madelaine, thank you so much for being here with us on Life with Living Cities. For our listeners who may not know you or your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
So I'm Madelaine Britt. I'm the manager of policy and strategic initiatives at the Mayor's Office of Financial Empowerment at the City of Rochester. I oversee our homeownership portfolio and our asset building work as a whole. So that's anything from the launch of our first citywide children's savings account program to our first-time homebuyer programs, as well as our credit equity project, which we'll be talking about today. Thanks to Living Cities, who provided us really incredible technical assistance and funding to do this. Last year, we launched the Credit Equity Project, which the explicit goal was that we could build the infrastructure and build the capacity of both housing providers and renters to be able to start to report their on-time rental payments. So we partnered with the Rochester Housing Authority as well as two small housing providers, which in total is inclusive of about 4,000 renters across the city of Rochester. So that over the course of 6 months, we provided them both a small grant as well as one-on-one technical assistance to build out a really comprehensive positive rent reporting program. And that was anything from choosing how they were going to report the on-time rental payments, which just means that typically how they approach it is they would work with what's called a third-party provider, which, I won't name names, but these different providers essentially look at the property management system that the provider already has. So, for example, the property management system of the Rochester Housing Authority, and then it looks at that and is then able to report for those renters who did opt in all of the on-time rental payments to the three credit bureaus. And so, it was anything from selecting how they were going to report the on-time rental payments. It was figuring out community engagement and messaging, right? And that was really key for us, that this, again, it's a renter-centered program, right? It's really about how do renters feel like they have the ability to participate in this and why it would be valuable to them. And so there was a lot of education around how you would communicate this to renters. And so that was a part of the capacity building program as well. And then at the end, after the 6 months, they all, chose their different paths of doing this and then are on different places in terms of implementing that rent reporting program. So that was the initial launch of the program, that 6-month initiative last year. Since then, we've continued to partner specifically with the Rochester Housing Authority. And we've done that for a few different reasons. The first is that, as I said, the Rochester Housing Authority is one of the largest housing providers in the city. They also are a nonprofit housing provider, which is important to us because we understand that they have, a specific agenda for their residents and not necessarily the bottom line, right? So they're thinking about it from a tenant perspective, which was important for us. It was also important that we partnered with the Housing Authority because they are deeply integrated within our existing, wraparound services, which is our Financial Empowerment Center, which offers free one-on-one financial counseling as a public service. So not only can renters, once they're able to enroll in this program, and that process has not started yet at the Housing Authority, but once they're able to enroll in positive rent reporting, they'll then also be able to work with a certified financial counselor who can assist them on, okay, it's really exciting that you've opted into this rent reporting program. What does this look like for your credit, now and in the future? What does it look like in the context of your larger asset building goals, like purchasing a home? And then how can the financial counselor assist them through that long-term ongoing relationship in terms of, those goals and how this rent reporting can potentially make it closer for them to achieve those goals. So that's currently where we are. We're partnering with the Housing Authority. We've been able to receive additional funding from the ESL Foundation, which is a local financial provider credit union here in Rochester, who've been able to assist us in being able to actually cover the costs of enrolling residents, a certain amount of residents at the Housing Authority. Because as I said, it's positive only, it's opt-in, but it's also meant to be a free service for the renters themselves.
Thank you, Madelaine. So we're talking about credit, right? And when people hear credit, they usually think about personal responsibility, being able to pay your bills on time, having that extra, carefulness with regards to your finances. But from a systems point of view, and from what you've seen in Rochester, what keeps getting in the way of people building credit that may not necessarily be just about personal responsibility?
I really appreciate that question. So I think the biggest thing is that the credit system, the traditional credit system, is not built to be equitable or inclusive, right? So we think about the traditional means of building credit. Typically, that's ways in which you would do that is already owning something. So owning a home or owning a car. And so because it's so ownership based, it's really excluding a lot of folks that might be renters, right? Maybe renters their whole life or might be renters the majority of their life. And so accessing credit at a systemic level, we feel is not an equitable system. system. And so for us, we're really thinking about how can we, as the City of Rochester, support and really partner with residents on their credit building journey through things like positive rent reporting. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to work on this particular project, is because we understand that the credit system isn't just individual behaviors, but it's the actual system itself that is not allowing for folks to be able to build wealth, to be able to build assets. And that's the goal of this program.
And that's very interesting because rent, I mean, I imagine there are a lot more renters than there are, I will say, homeowners right now.
There are. Yeah.
And it's the biggest bill that most people pay.
Right.
And,
Exactly. Yeah.
and it doesn't automatically count as your credit. That's insane, to me at least.
No, it absolutely is. And that's a perfect example, right? Like that's the system not working to the benefit of the majority of people, right? The majority of folks in the city of Rochester are renters, right? So more than 50% of city of Rochester residents rent their apartment. It's their biggest bill a month. It's their most expensive bill a month. It's the most consistent bill a month. And so that's another example of the system of credit that should count towards your ability to demonstrate, hey, I pay my rent on time, right? Hey, I pay this bill on time, so that I should be able to access additional financing and loans in the future. And so because we're not set up for that, a large majority of our city residents who are trying to build economic momentum, are not able to do so.
So on the surface, you know, the work that you're doing, or the work that needs to go into it, the rent reporting, right? Being able to use your rent to go towards your credit. That sounds simple. Um, but why is it actually such a big shift in how the financial system usually works?
It's really important that there's just a mind shift in terms of how we traditionally think about credit, to your earlier question, right? So, because we typically, both renters, homeowners, housing providers, don't typically think of rent as a source of building credit. There's just got to be a level of building momentum around why this is important and also why it's possible. Positive rent reporting has actually been around for over a decade, and there's a variety of different organizations, both nonprofit and for profit, that have worked on this issue because of the fact that they are trying to address the systemic problem. So we're not necessarily creating something new. It's just building that level of understanding as to why it's important is really that first step. So that was what we tried to accomplish with this initial pilot program of working with 3 trusted housing providers that we had vetted in partnership with the Credit Builders Alliance to determine that these providers have the interests of their residents at hand. We had heard from residents of, for example, the Housing Authority, that this was something that they were interested in having a decision to make. They don't have to participate, but it's an option on the table that no longer, had not been there before. And so I think although the process itself has been around for a while, the process itself is not necessarily particularly difficult for a housing provider to implement, or frankly, a city to implement. It's really about that momentum building that we're trying to demonstrate is there. And we're doing that, in relation to cities and states that have already done this work, right? Areas like Colorado and California. But what's really exciting, I think, for us is that we're starting in a smaller mid-sized city, right? A mid-sized city that doesn't necessarily get the attention of a New York or, a California. But we want to bring that to our residents as well, because we know that it's their right, that they should be able to build their credit in the ways in which make the most sense for them. So.
Now, you mentioned, being able to bring it to your residents. Thank you for that, by the way. Um, so I've heard the term credit invisibility, or being credit invisible. And I imagine it's just sort of what you described. And why is that such a powerful form of exclusion inside a city, like for your residents specifically?
So credit is one of those things that impact our daily lives and all of our different decisions, right? So that can be anything from when you go and apply for an apartment. Typically, a landlord is doing a credit check. If you are going to apply for a car loan, if you're even applying for a cell phone, your credit score or your lack of credit, so to your point, credit invisibility, which means you don't have credit history, that can mean that you either can't get access to financing, so you can't access a car loan at all, or an affordable car loan at a smaller interest rate. right? So that means you can't have access to potentially a vehicle that can help you get to work. It means that you can't have access to a cell phone that makes it easier to communicate to your family or just get your day-to-day needs done, right? And then it also has a major impact on your ability to live in an apartment that you like and is a high-quality apartment. And then down the line, if you're looking at, I want to purchase a home someday, a large part of that process is being able to demonstrate your credit history. And so credit is that underlying thing that's kind of following us around at all points in our lives. And it's particularly important then that we open up this avenue for credit building because, again, as I said, rent is one of those things where it's the biggest bill that most of us have. And so to not open up that window of opportunity, I think is really a missed opportunity, right? And so that's why we've taken this so seriously, particularly for Rochester. So, and I will say too that our credit invisibility rate is 1 in 5 residents, right? So it's particularly important for the City of Rochester. If we know that 1 in 5 City of Rochester residents don't have credit history or have what's called subprime credit, which is less than a 600-point score, and again, that's going to have a major impact on their long-term and their day-to-day financial opportunities.
That's such an important program that you were running. And my thought goes to, obviously, it was great. It's great that it was successful, but were there any lessons learned about pushback or pain points or anything that made the process harder that other cities who are trying to get into this space or trying to make rent count as credit can learn from, maybe, that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the biggest things is just trying to help folks understand what this is, right? Why this is beneficial for both the renters and for the housing providers themselves. And I think there's a level of, particularly for the housing providers, where this is very new to at least those housing providers in the City of Rochester, there's a level of education and training that has to happen. And so when we first launched the pilot, we were a little surprised, right? Because we found that when we put the call out for participating housing providers for this grant program, for this technical assistance program, we didn't hear from as many providers as we wanted to, affordable housing providers in particular. And so I think what we learned from that is that it was so important for us to start the whole process with building relationships with housing providers, doing one-on-one calls. We did do several presentations with providers to be able to, sit them down and say, this is why this is valuable and how this would actually work for you on your day-to-day. And once we had started those conversations, that's when we started to see more momentum and more applications coming in for providers to participate. So I think that would just be one piece of advice I would have is there's a level of technical training and really momentum building that has to happen in the beginning in order for this to be successful. And we're continuing to do that, right? So really the second phase of this initiative is going beyond just that, initial pilot program with the Housing Authority and these 3 providers to actually make revisions on our RFP process, right? So our existing RFP process, request for proposals, which essentially for folks who don't have a big understanding of that, if you want to enter a bid or a contract with the city to build new housing, you have to apply through an RFP process that's then reviewed by the City of Rochester, and then a particular contract is made with the best bid for that contract. And so currently that RFP process does not require or recommend or include anything related to positive rent reporting or a credit building initiative. And so one of the things we're doing now is actually integrating new language into that RFP. But that's a process, right? Again, because we need to even build momentum and understanding as to what this type of program is, you first have to do that before you can necessarily require it among providers so that they understand what they would have to do in order to apply for these RFPs. And so, it's a process in helping folks understand what this is, adding new language to the RFP, starting with, essentially saying it's a recommendation. If you want to be viewed maybe or scored higher in this RFP process, you would provide something like this, then getting to the point of requiring this. And so, I would say that it's largely about building the technical capacity of providers in order for this to happen. And then in addition to that, it's really important, and I think why our program is so valuable is because we have the Financial Empowerment Center, right? We have the financial counseling program. And that's what I think sets us apart. And I would recommend to any city that's trying to approach this from a holistic and wraparound approach is that if you want folks to be able to build financial momentum it isn't just limited to their credit score. And that's why we wanted this to come out of the Office of Financial Empowerment through our Financial Empowerment Center as a partner, because that way, again, we can be a long-term partner with the overall credit health and the financial health of the residents who decide that they want to participate.
Thank you very much, Madelaine. Santiago, is there anything that you would like to ask? Like, and please, feel free, you can chime in here and take over for a second.
Thank you for giving all of the info. And I want to stay in the role of the city for a bit, and why the case of Rochester is such, um, such an innovative case study, I think, for the rest of the country. We would love to see more about actual data coming from other cities doing this, but to our understanding, Rochester is really like leading this from a kind of like a comprehensive financial empowerment or financial um, security perspective, which is very aligned with how Living Cities works. We also see that the city is very intentional in connecting this specific tool or this specific program to existing infrastructure around financial empowerment, but also um, home buying processes and additional information to navigate the financial system. Why do you think the city is best positioned to lead a project or a pilot like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for a variety of reasons. The first being the fact that we do have so much authority in terms of our ability to enter bids or have RFP processes, right? So the city's at a real advantage when it comes to being able to build affordable housing and partner with housing providers and having, the land and the capacity to do that. And so when you're able to systemize something like this through that RFP process, right? So that's through our purchasing process, essentially. That's taking it to an extra level beyond a program and actually putting it into policy. And so I think that's what's really exciting for municipality to lead that work, because it's only the municipality that is able to bid out these projects and to be able to change systems in that way. I also think that it's, we have the infrastructure, both from a financial standpoint, from a capacity standpoint, and the relationship standpoint, to actually build momentum around something like this, because we have existing relationship with residents, right? The same residents that might be interested in, looking at this for their own selves and their own families. We also have established relationships with them through, the services that we provide, through our home buying programs, through our financial counseling programs, through our, existing partnerships through community-based organizations. And so I think there's still always has to be a level of trust building, and that's between the city and residents. That's always going to be the case. And we take that really to heart and seriously, that we have to continue to build those relationships with residents. And so, given that, I think this is a way for us to demonstrate that we do really value the fact that if we have 50% of our residents who are renters and 1 in 5 of them are credit invisible, right? It's up to and of the authority and the responsibility of the city to take that seriously, and to be able to understand that if you want to build wealth and you want to build economic prosperity for every person, you have to, and we want to be inclusive of those folks as well. And so that's why I think it's important, not only from a from a policy perspective, but also from a what can cities do for people? Like, I've worked in city government for over 10 years. I believe in city government, right? Like, I think it can be a tool for building equity, for building opportunity. And so it is our responsibility that as city employees and as city governments, that we take that really seriously, because of the impact that we can have, and because of the challenges that we're trying to address in our city.
That's great. Thank you. Like, quick question about like the kind of your vision and the OFE's vision of success. Like, how do you know this is working? Like, how do you like, what are the signs, or what is the goal that you're really trying to get to with this pilot?
I think I have a few different goals. So the first goal would be that for the Rochester Housing Authority in particular, we see that the majority of Rochester Housing Authority residents who want to enroll in this type of program, that they actually see a credit score increase, right? So if we look at data from around the country, we've seen anywhere from an average of 23 points to 60-point increase for residents who participate in something like this. And so I want us to hit 60% increase for the residents who engage in this through the Rochester Housing Authority. And I even believe that we can hit higher numbers than that, right? Because we are integrating full service financial counseling and economic opportunity programming within this credit building initiative. And so I would love to see us go beyond that 60-point average increase. I also think it would be a huge point of success if we can actually demonstrate both to our city residents, to our city leaders, and also cities similar to us in size that you can take this really innovative approach and you can change your own systems and policies through things like the RFP process. And so if, one of those things is like if this mid-sized city of Rochester can do it, cities around the country can do it. And because I think, again, the actual commitment to this work is changing at the policy level. And so a piece of success for me would be that in 3 years, that RFP language is really strong. That RFP language is moving from recommending to requiring. We have to get to that point. We have to demonstrate that that's even possible and that there's impact from the examples that we're having with the housing authority. So we're not there yet. But my goal would be that in the next couple of years, if you ask a renter or a housing provider, renters understand that, especially a housing authority resident, that this is available to them, right? It's clearly established as a practice and they know it's available to them. And then providers themselves understand that they have a responsibility and also there's a benefit to them from, more on-time rental payments to longer-term residents. There's a benefit to them to integrate this type of program within their project or property management system. And so that awareness building, if in 3 years, we asked somebody on the street if this was something that they knew about, that they knew about it and they knew how, more importantly, they knew how they could take action on it.
Great. Before I pass it back to Justin, just want to get your first impressions of the pilot was launched relatively recently, and of course we know about it because we're big fans of Rochester. But what are you hearing from the community, from the housing providers, from the third party partners that you're activating the housing authority?
One of the things that was so exciting to me after our big launch event for this program was that we got phone calls from both housing providers and renters saying, how can they get involved, right? And my background before this role was I worked a lot with the New York City Housing Authority, and I worked in tenant organizing type of work. And never in my career have I gotten a phone call that was positive from both ends of that spectrum, right? And so for us, I think that was, again, it was a sign to us that, hey, we should keep going with this because those parties who oftentimes don't necessarily see eye to eye or feel like they have similar interests were sharing this goal of potentially either participating or providing positive rent reporting. And so for us, that was really, really exciting for that launch event to lead to those conversations. And so the general, I think, feedback that we have received is how do we track success, right? And so that's something that we're really looking at with the housing authority, potentially bringing in a professional evaluator to see, similar to the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, where they did a study on how did this actually impact their residents. We'd like to do something similar for Rochester. We also, would love to see how we can, again, build more momentum among other providers. But that's where, again, this positive feedback that we've gotten from the housing authority, from residents who are calling us still and saying, how do I participate? And we're saying it's about to launch. The housing authority will be enrolling folks soon. That means for me that we're doing something right. And it means that we're getting at, again, that systemic issue that has been a systemic issue in the city of Rochester and around the country for decades.
So, as a national intermediary and a member collaborative, very focused on closing the racial wealth gaps in U.S. cities, and who thinks that, capital and the inclusive flow of capital is the tool for more people to build wealth. We love this. We love this pilot. We love the tool, and we love the intentionality that the city is putting behind this effort. How can we or other national organizations help the city of Rochester, expand upon the great work that you're doing? or uplift it so more people can hear about this?
I really appreciate that. So I think the next step for us is figuring out how we can actually assess and evaluate for the long term what the results of the pilot will look like. And so, in particular, when we're thinking about the Rochester Housing Authority, we see there being an opportunity for some type of independent evaluation to be able to track success, right? And be able to demonstrate when you operate a program like this, or when you incorporate a tool like this, these are the results from a financial health perspective. So this percentage more amount of folks went and purchased a home, or this percentage amount of folks built their credit and they were able to then be able to get a lower cost loan on a cell phone or on a car. And then again, integrating that within the existing financial counseling services that we have, we do think there's an opportunity for us to demonstrate at a national level using data and using that evaluation to be able to say that cities can take an active role in launching programs like this. And so for us, we would love for there to be some next opportunity for bringing in that independent evaluation so that we can expand upon this program and be able to solidify it even further. Because to your point, we see this as one of the ways in which we can start to address the racial wealth gap, and we can address particularly the gap between Black and white home ownership in the city of Rochester, which is where this all came from. After we did the Living Cities assessment several years ago, we saw that a major disparity in accessing home ownership was credit, right? And so that's where this all started. And then we were able to go, more granular and say, absolutely, homeownership is important. And also, what are all the other assets and what are all the other steps before homeownership that credit impacts? And so we understand that if we can make this something that is successful in Rochester, we can bring that to a national scale, and it'll impact all of those different factors from an equity and racial justice perspective around the country.
Great. Passing it back to you, Justin.
Thank you, Santiago. Madelaine, it's been wonderful having you on the podcast. Now, is there anything that we have not discussed or talked about that you think would be interesting for our listeners to know?
Just that, if there's any cities out there that are interested in launching a program like this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are constantly learning from cities bigger and smaller than us in the city of Rochester. And so we want to be partners in this work. And so if you have any questions, if you're interested in launching a program like this, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Mayor's Office of Financial Empowerment at the City of Rochester. This work is one done together and one that needs to continue to be elevated around the country. And so we would love to partner with other cities that are interested in this.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today on Live with Living Cities. We're always thrilled to have you as part of these essential conversations about building a just and equitable society. Your time, curiosity, and commitment to change mean a lot, and we can't wait to have you back for our next episode. If you'd like to get involved in our work, visit our website at livingcities.org to learn more about the programs in the cities we're working with. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more stories from the front lines of change, and please, share this episode with others who care about closing the wealth gap and building a more equitable future for all. We'd also love to hear from organizations interested in becoming members of Living Cities. If your organization would like to join our coalition of changemakers, reach out to us at lcinfo@livingcities.org. That's LCINFO@livingcities.org with the subject line, Member. And before we wrap up, we want to extend a huge thank you to the incredible organizations that make this work possible. Living Cities is powered by a coalition of leaders and changemakers whose dedication and support drive our mission forward. We're honored to work alongside you in the movement to close the wealth gap and create lasting impact in communities across the country. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, stay engaged, stay inspired, and let's keep working together toward a future where equity is a reality for all. I'm Justin Charles, and this has been Live with Living Cities.